1889 to 1890, the Russian influenza, otherwise known as Asiatic influenza, was a savage flu pandemic that executed roughly 1 million individuals around the world. The flare-up began spreading in 1889 and was the biggest 19th-century pandemic of flu. It was additionally the main genuine pandemic that occurred in the time of bacteriology. The underlying cases were accounted for in Bukhara in Central Asia, Turkestan, Athabasca in northwestern Canada, and Greenland. Inside the half-year, the malady had tainted St. Petersburg, Russia. Just 4 months after the fact, the flu had spread all through the northern side of the equator. Quick populous development in urban zones over the globe assisted with making a pandemic. 8. The Third Cholera Pandemic, 1852 to 1860. The deadliest of the 7 cholera episodes was the third significant flare-up that kept going from 1852 to 1860. Much the same as the initial 2 pandemics, the third started in India and spread all through Asia, Europe, North America, and Africa. In 1854, the most exceedingly terrible year, cholera murdered 23,000 individuals in Great Britain. Roughly 10,000 of those casualties were from London. During the third cholera pandemic, around 1 million individuals lost their lives. Numerous passings originated from Russia, Chicago, Tokyo, Spain, Venezuela, and Brazil. Contaminated was believed to be the reason for cholera. English Dr. John Snow followed cases in London and distinguished polluted water as the reason for the transmission of the infection. He followed the water to the Broad Street siphon and persuaded neighborhood authorities to expel the siphon handle. In spite of the fact that the amount of nearby cases drastically diminished after his discoveries, the numbers kept on ascending in different regions of the world for a couple of more years. 3. 7. Smallpox, 1520. For a considerable length of time, smallpox was a threat in Europe, Asia, and Arabia. 3 of each 10 tainted individuals kicked the bucket. The main European voyages carried the infection to the New World, where individuals were not safe to the illness. The individuals of advanced Mexico and the United States saw demise rates a lot higher than those of the Old World. A few episodes of smallpox were viewed as pestilences. Here, we'll talk about the one of every 1520 that crushed the Aztec Empire. Be that as it may, by and large, the spread of the malady over the globe made it a pandemic. In North and South America, smallpox took roughly 100 years to crush around 90% of the indigenous individuals. In Mexico, the populace dropped to 1 million individuals from around 11 million preceding the European success. Eventually, the destructive infection helped the Spanish to vanquish the Aztecs and Incas in light of the fact that their populaces scarcely existed gratitude to the ailment. Hundreds of years after the fact, smallpox was the primary infection scourge halted by an immunization. In 1980, the World Health Organization proclaimed that smallpox had been killed over the globe. 6. Antonine Plague, 165 to 180. Perhaps the deadliest pandemic in history is likewise one of the most seasoned. The Antonine Plague happened in 165 to 180 and at last ended the lives of around 5 million individuals. The Romans carried the infection back home with them after a war with the Parthians. The infection began in Asia Minor and afterwards spread to Greece and Italy. For the following 2 decades, the Roman Empire saw an episode not at all like anything they had ever experienced. At the pinnacle of the spread, they were seeing around 2,000 fatalities for each day. It was assessed that 7 to 10% of the whole Roman Empire was executed, with higher rates in denser zones. The realm's rulers Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus both kicked the bucket during this time frame. Many have guessed that they were executed by this ailment, in spite of the fact that the disease that assaulted these individuals is obscure. Numerous researchers trust it was an episode of smallpox. 5. Asian flu, 1957-58, in the 20th century. The second major flu pandemic was the Asian influenza of 1957, otherwise known as the Asian. 1889 to 1890, the Russian influenza, otherwise known as Asiatic influenza, was a savage flu pandemic that executed roughly 1 million individuals.